Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this fellowship course on customizing pawns by Edward Bennett. So, in this, we are going to be going over a number of different things. We will primarily we're going to work on this. This is a class that's supposed to take you after you've done the animation blueprints, so you know how to run animations, you know how to put together animations. This is a class where we want to help you bring in change your pawn, bring in pawns from other places, or alter and bring in assets that can run with the pawns that you have. So we're going to be looking at a whole load of different ways. But we're going to be starting off we're going to be looking at some of the Paragon assets. Now, Paragon is a good example it's a free asset that comes with Epic Games from an old game called Paragon, being discontinued. However, all of the assets Epic is sharing for free. Now, we're going to be looking at not so much the rigging the merge, but we're going to be doing a fair amount of retargeting animations, adding in a different mesh for your characters, and we'll talk about building out accessories, and we're going to play around with the camera and the movement. So to start with, there are two plugins that we would need in order to do what we're looking at. And the first one is the Skeletal Mesh editing tool. This is going to, when we open up a skeletal mesh, this is going to bring up a whole load of new menus and new options for us to work with it. So we have modeling tools as default within the engine. However, the modeling tools themselves are limited to static meshes. The other one, if we get a chance to, we're going to work on is Chaos Cloth. And this is our cloth-based system, physics-based cloth system. Now, when we look at the character creation pipeline, this is a kind of standard setup. You'd usually work from concept art to modeling, then texturing, coming on into rigging and setting up the animations, and then playing around with the movement and the camera so that you can get the feel, an appropriate feel for the character. Now, the first three theoretically could be done within Unreal. However, the tools are still sort of in their infancy. However, the rigging, animation setup, and the camera movement we can look at. We're not going to be doing much on the way of rigging. Still, I'd still argue that this is sort of in its infancy at this point. So in the last session, we were looking at the animation blueprint. You should have gone through and created a state machine, a slot in order to play montages. And you probably haven't touched the control rig, but we may have a look at it within this session. But the state machine is going to generate the pose, which it's going to generate the basic pose of a pawn based on a current state. The slot will allow us to override the state machine in order to play animations. And the control rig is very often bolted on as a final step in order to, it's often used in order to correct the setup of how the animation runs. One of the big examples of the control rig, which you'll see in the usual setup, is FootIK, where small adaptations are made right at the end in order to make sure that the feet sit on the actual ground rather than floating above it. Now, from this, I'm going to jump immediately into the engine. Now, we're working on the project if you fired up the project, hopefully you have something that looks like this. So we have this big yellow guy in the center. And apart from that, we are working with the third person template. Can I check to see at this point if there is any problems getting hold of this project or and loading it up?
I don't think there's problems getting it, but they're asking whether this is going to be a follow along or
Think I'd like you guys to follow along in this one. It is what I'm. It's a bit of we're building out. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be. You can just take notes and then do it afterwards, but what we're looking at doing is we're taking an asset pack and we're seeing how to implement it within the engine. So I'm going to do it both ways. I'm going to take stuff from the asset uh, so yeah, I would say if you can follow along, that's great. If not, then note taking. You can go sort of either ways. We're broken down into two main examples.
okay. The other thing as well is that people are like, there's a lot of files that are still unzipping, so maybe give them a couple of minutes.
Yeah, can do.
Oh, Daniel's is going to take about 30 minutes apparently, so.
Right. Yeah, I am sorry. You should download. I mean, it's 1.6 gig, so it's
All right.
just to clarify. Don't worry about this one for the time being. This is the very big one. We're going with the steel example, which is just 1.6 gig. Uh,
Presumably easier to unzip as well.
yeah, I mean, it's I could make it even smaller if it's a bit more time, but yeah, I'm sorry for that late update, but uh, yeah, hopefully be able to get that. What I'll do in the meantime is I'll just have a quick talk about the Paragon assets because the Paragon assets are good from the point that if you were to jump into the um, if you jump into the store and just type Paragon in, you can see that we're going to get a whole bunch of different assets at this point. Now, there's loads of them. So Paragon was a large, it was a MOBA-esque game. So it was a 5 versus 5, I think it's 5 versus 5 game, where we had inside it, there were lots and lots of different heroes that you could use. And why this is nice is because everything is now being given away for free within the engine, and all of these characters are rigged to the same epic skeleton. And this means it's quite convenient in the new setup in order to either use these characters within as a base within one of your games, or for you to take any of their animation sets and apply it to any other model that you're working. So the one that we are going to be looking at this time is the steel set. You can download it from here and add it to your project, but this is considerably larger. What I've given you is a quite a bit smaller. I think this comes in at 5.5 gig, where where the files that I've sent across are 1.6 gig. However, if you optimize it in the way that I've shown, I've managed to get it down to about 100 meg. I might just mute you a second, James. Do feel free to unmute, just give your feedback. So these are great assets. Now, one of the things that isn't wonderful about them is if you jump into them, you can't actually see. So if we look at it here, it's great. It's got a number of different skins, and any of these skins that you can use, and they're all rigged up in a very, very similar way. Now, as you can see under this, it says rigged yes, scaled to the epic skeleton, yes. And so this means that this is going to be quite easily, should be quite easily usable. Okay, it doesn't show you what animations they have. However, if you do want to see the animations, they are quite easy to get hold of on, I'm just going to find it here. Second. this first part, the first part, you guys don't need to follow along. I'm going to be talking about materials and baking out textures and stuff like that. So if you've got downloads, it's probably going to be about 20 minutes before we get into the first real exercise. But if I go YouTube, this is steel. Okay, so if you want to know what animation sets are included, you can presume that they have all the standard movement animations, they have jumps and a number of different attacks. They also have some emotes and some things like waving and stuff like that. But there is a ton of great stuff here. Okay, so let's have a look at the character. Now, what you'll find in this file is only going to be a subsection of what would be available. Now, the reason I've selected these is because we own them as Epic. So I can use them in promotional material and there's no sort of problems with that. However, this will apply to any marketplace set of animations or characters that you bring in, which say they are rigged to the Epic skeleton. So, and we'll touch on how to work with it if it's not rigged to the Epic skeleton. So the first thing I would like to talk about is the level of optimization on this character. So there's two problems that we have here. The first one is we have this shield. Now, there are a couple of ways of getting rid of this, especially when you're working with Paragon assets. A lot of them will have weapons attached to them already, and that's a bit sort of awkward to work with if you are if you're trying to use this in another instance. So let's look at cleaning this mesh up to start with. So you don't follow along at this point, especially as if this goes wrong, I don't want to lose it for everybody. But again, at the beginning, we discussed the plugin, the skeletal mesh editing tool. And this is quite useful because it's going to allow us to change this mesh. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control and E. So, well, Control and B will bring me to the mesh. So the one that I'm working with here is steel. And I'm going to rename this to steel _ use. And if you do have the file open, I would recommend you do that. It's just so that we can make sure that we're all working with the same sculpt. Okay, and the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to press Control and E, and that will open up the asset that I have selected. So when you open it up, you probably have something that is looking like this. Now, what we want to do is we're looking to get rid of the shield. And there are two elements to the shield. The first thing is there are the bones that are attached to it, and then there is the mesh. Now, if I was to, one of the easiest ways, first thing is let's have a look at the bones. So in order to see the bones in this editor, we need to come down to bones and change it to all hierarchy. And that will allow us to see where all the bones are transparently through the character. Now, I'm going to start off by deleting the mesh section of this. And this on the left here is what will appear if you have add in the plugin. It's going to give us a number of different options. So we're going to be able to edit the bones, edit the skin weight, or the deformation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start off by, if I want to if I want to get rid of faces, the first thing I need to be able to do is select those faces. And the easiest way is by using polygroups. So the first thing that I want to be able to do is assign those polygroups. And I'm going to do that in this top section here, and that's the paint polygroups. So from this, as soon as I plug it in, we're going to get a white panel here. Now, you don't have to follow along with this. We've got a simpler way of doing this at the end anyway, hopefully. But just be aware that it exists. So what this is going to allow me to do is paint a polygroup section. So as you can see here, I'm trying to paint the shield because that's what I want to get rid of. And the main problem is all of the little faces in the middle. So I feel like I've got most of them. So I'm going to push accept. So that's created basically one polygroup, and that's the shield. And now I can come down to the third section at the bottom here. And that gives me an option for polygroup edit. So with polygroup edit, I've got it looks like two polygroups, shield and nothing. So if I select the shield and I push the button delete faces, you can see that it deletes everything that's there. Now I could go back in and I could also delete these, but I'm gonna leave these for the time being because I want to show, well, actually they might get deleted manually. So that's most of the shield gone to start with. And the next thing is, I could theoretically leave these bones, especially if I've deleted all of the faces which are connected to those bones, because we're no longer going to see it's no longer going to do anything. However, if you do want to delete the bones, we have an option at the top here for edit bones. I'm just going to select this bone here, go edit skeleton, and I am going to remove. And that's going to get rid of that bone. So now we have a character. I'll deal with these and I'll show you why in the next setup. So we got our character and we've removed the shield section that we didn't really want. So I'm going to hit save and jump back in, and you can see that he's looking absolutely fine. Okay, so I'm going to save all assets. Now, this is another bit that you don't need to really follow along with. If you want to do this afterwards, you can track it down. You can look at it as you can go back over the video for this because this will be slightly complicated. But the next thing I want to look at with this guy is his materials. Now, if I was to come up into the lit mode and down onto optimization view mode, shader complexity, and give this a second. Now this is an interesting view because this is going to tell us how expensive the shaders are to render. So as we can see, this character is relatively expensive to render. It's not massive. He's coming in here at adjusting in the red. It's not like it's coming over to the white. But the materials are relatively expensive. Now, these materials can be good because if we were to look at the materials, so I'm just going to, if we were to look at the materials, under the materials, we've got a number of different material slots here. We've got a lot of materials. Now, if I open up just one of the materials, I think I'll go with the upper body. Now, we can see that this is a relatively complicated material. Now, the main problem with this is it's hard to come and take out into a third-party product and then edit the materials. If you could say, for example, you're using Substance Painter or something like that, this is a bit unpalatable if you wanted to make your own changes. Now, what's kind of useful with these though is if I was to right-hand click and create a material instance, you should find that we have, oh, we don't seem to, yeah, so we have some, yeah, we have variables that allow us to change this. So if I was to come in here and I was to drag this over to, what are we working with? Upper body. So I can change this instance to variants, plastic tint, I could change to blue, for example. And it's a very quick way for us to fix up the material. So if we wanted to play around with the character, we can do relatively quickly. Now, what I'd like to quickly show you is a method of baking these down into baking these down into textures. Now, we should see in here, we have something called Steel Optimized. And Steel Optimized has a number of different textures. Here we have a blank eye face material and upper body. Now, these are all broken. Okay. Textures. Okay, we have all the textures, so I can fix them. We'll just start with the upper body. Interesting. Okay, so I probably need to fix these, but I'm just going to demonstrate it anyway. But okay, so we have lower body here. If I was to go into the textures and find lower body, where is the probably this one? Okay. I'm going to drag in these three textures. And connect these up. So I'm hoping that's the correct one. Feeling. No, that looks correct. Okay, so what these are is these are baked textures. Or we have the albedo or the base color, and we have a texture sample, which is a packed version of the three different categories. And we have the normal one that we've created as well. Now, if I was to take this texture and place it on the upper body and run this through and look at this through the optimization view mode, you can see that this is considerably cheaper. Now, I'm not going to go through and fix all of those up for the time being, but I'm just going to talk you through how I have created those. And also we have something that's called a blank. Now, this blank is probably the cheapest material that you can create. It is quite literally a unlit masked material, which has 0 going into the opacity mask. And this is useful because in this case, a much easier way to get rid of the shield would have been to just add a blank material in for the shield. So you can see that blank material is going to allow us to very quickly get the shield in there. So that looks like I've placed it in the wrong section. Yes, it does look like it's listed in the wrong section. However, I am not going to play that. I'm just going to show you how you might go about baking a Unreal texture so that it could be used within an engine. So, okay. So if I wanted, for example, to bake the top half of the material here, I'm just going to move to the upper body section, and I'm gonna create I need to create a tool in order to bake the material. And so I can do that by coming in to the blueprint class. You don't have to worry about following along with this. Selecting an actor, and I'm going to call this texture baker. And I'm going to double click on this. And I only want to add in some code into the event graph. I'm going to add, so I'm going to search and I'm going to add in a custom event. And I'm going to call this bake texture. And then I'm going to search for bake. So I need a render. No, it's draw, sorry. Draw texture. Draw material to render target. So all I need is a singular task. I'm going to make this bake texture a call-in editor because that will allow me to call this texture. And then I'm going to promote both of these to a variable and make both of these variables instance editable. So again, don't feel like you need to follow along for this one. But we haven't touched on what a render target is. So I'm going to create what a render target is it is a flat texture, but it's designed to be written to at runtime. So, or as we go along. And it's used quite a lot in things like making blending textures together. So, and writing to it for things like mini maps and those other kind of elements. But in this case, we're just going to use it in order to make a simplified texture here. So under right-hand click, I am going to create a render target. So it would be under, I think, materials, search for render target. So we're looking for a render target. And I'm going to call this render target baked matte. I'm going to double click on this. And the first thing is we need to change the size. And because we know that this is going to be I'm going to times this by, what is it? Times it by 8. Yeah, so I'll times both of them by 8. So this is the size of the texture that I want to write out to. So we're going to have 2K textures for each of the elements. Okay, so that is saved. So we've got our render target and we have our different elements. So I'm working with the upper body. So I'm going to start working with the upper body. First thing is I will duplicate this. So just in case, because I'm going to need to make some changes to this. So I will duplicate the material. Now, this is where what we want to do is we want to turn this material into we want to turn this material so that it can output to a render target. Now, at the moment, we have just one output pin here. Now that's because this is just a material attribute. Now, if I click on the material attribute, we'll break this down into a material. And if I drag off of this and go make, so break material attribute. Now I need to change this to a, I think I need to change it to a unlit. And if I plugged the base color into the emissive, we can now see that this is what the material looks like. Apply and save. Now what I can do is if I take my actor and drag this into the world, I should have compile, save. I've got two input variables here. So one of them I'm going to put my render target, and the other one I'm going to put the material. Now, if I push bake texture, it's going to take a little bit of time because actually I'm not 100% sure why. I should be able to do this lightning fast. But if you wait, you can see that it now generates that as a map. And it's still a render target. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to create a static texture off the back of it. And I can rename this to texture upper body. Yeah, base color, something like that. And now this can be used in any of the materials broken down. So it's a great way to just bake out a texture. Now I won't do the rest of them, but if you want to do the other masks, for example, if you wanted normal map, you just need to plug the normal map into the emissive color and then bake that out. And what I tend to do is a make float 4 and plug in the metallic, specular, roughness, and ambient occlusion. And that gives me a channel packed map for all of the rest of them. The only note that I would say is it takes a long time to render out the render target. So you might think it's not working, but it might be a good idea to just go away, sort of have a cup of tea. Whilst that's going on. So this allows you. Oh, go on.
Just before you keep going, is it possible for you to kind of give us an overview of the overall thing that you've done here with the texture baker? Just because I know a few people have been struggling to follow because they were having quite a lot of crashes with the skeletal mesh editor.
Okay.
So even if it's just an overview, I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Certainly. So in this case, I was just looking at how you might go about baking down some of the materials, because one of the problems that you may well have whenever you come into whenever you take assets from elsewhere is they are very complicated unreal materials that you might not be able to use, especially if you're used to going out into another package to edit them. You'll find the materials there are going to be difficult to move across. So I'm giving an example of how you can bake out these materials. And what I've done in this case is I've created an actor, and as part of the actor, I've created a base custom event, which I've added a call in editor, which just has the draw material to target render. And then I've promoted both of these to variables and made them instance editable so that we can grab them from outside the engine. And what this allows us to do is we need to go out and create a render target. So if I search for render target, Search for render. You can see there is a render target here. And what a render target is it's a an image that you can write to at runtime. So we can use that as something that we can output all of the complicated code that goes into this and write it to a texture. So what I've then done, and I'll demonstrate it with the normal map. So is I've created a duplication of the material, and I have you have to make sure that you are working with a you have to make sure that you're working with a material attribute, the full material attributes, because we need a unlit surface that we plug, whatever we plug into the emissive color. So I'll plug in the normal map. I think that's relatively fast. And I've broken the attributes, but whatever pin you plug into that, now, if I go to my actor within the level and push bake texture, you'll see, and it's going to take a little while, but I don't think it's that long. So there you go. You can now see that the render target, which I've selected, now shows the normal map. If I right hand click on that, I can save that as a static texture. And so I'm just illustrating this as, I mean, if I used all of the correct elements, if I used all of the broken down textures, this not only would this be a lot more optimized, it wouldn't have the options you'd be able to change stuff, but it would give you the ability to go in and edit or create masks, or if you are used to working with substance painting from outside of Unreal. Checking that's okay, James?
Yeah, I think so. We have one question, which is how did you create the Texture Baker blueprint? And I can't remember exactly what the blueprint inherits from, so I just want to make sure that
it just inherits from the actor class. So I just got a normal actor class, and I created a custom event, and I got baked texture. And I drag off and go draw to render, draw material to render target. And I only needed to make this a call in editor. And then I right hand clicked and I promoted these both to variables. So it's the quickest thing to make. It's something unfortunately we don't have a tool for internally. The one that we've got that bakes out materials also makes a proxy, which is not very useful, especially if you're working with things like skeleton meshes. So I just grabbed these two and I made them instance editable. Okay. I think we are. So this one, I think it's nice to understand and allows you to work with them. So from this point on, I'm probably going to jump into, are there any more questions? Because otherwise I'll jump into the retargeting.
I don't think there are any questions. There's a couple of questions that we can answer ourselves on Slack, so I think you're good to go.
Okay, hopefully everyone has the project downloaded. If you don't, it's fine to just watch and follow along. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the third person character and we're going to be using our new Paragon asset with it. So let's get started in that case. So I'm going to close down all of these except for the skeleton. So what I would like you to do is if you click on the mesh which is in the level, press Control B, then when you find the skeletal mesh, if you can rename it so it has U's on the end of it, that's just going to mean we definitely know we're using the right skeletal mesh. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is find the third person character, because we're going to change this to use our new mesh. So if you jump in and find the third person character and open it up, you should see we had something that looks a bit like this. Now, if I was to select the mesh in the left-hand side, and under the skeletal mesh assets, if I come in and just type in use, then we can grab the steel asset, which gives us something like this. Okay. So one of the things I would like to do is make sure, I think probably everything below 5, if you just change that to blank. Is it blank? Is it? Yeah, blank. So it's this blank material here. If you could set all of those to blank, that will get rid of the shield and it will cut down the cost quite a bit of the engine. So we're not using any of those ones. You should hopefully see that he has crunched in on himself like this. I'm going to save and compile. If I push play, oh god, okay. Trying to avoid. Okay, there's a couple of things we can do. Probably I might limit it so it's just working with LOD 0. So I can regenerate the LODs, but let's make sure that the animations are playing okay on the character. So I'm just going to come in and find the animations. No, they're not. Okay, because that's the shield. Right. So we'll look at Steel Death. So you can see that we have some LOD issues here. I think that's if we've played around with when we played around with the skeleton, it's caused some issues. Now we should hopefully be able to fix that. So if I go back to the skeleton, what I'm going to do, well, the skeletal mesh is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get rid of some of the LODs. So I'm just making sure I can fix this. Because I've deleted the bones and I've deleted the faces, but I've deleted only on one LOD. Should have realized that. And okay. Might be able to just force the LOD on this. Force LOD model 0. That's 1. Yeah, okay, so if you could, for the time being, just come into the force LOD model 0, and we'll look at getting that fixed in the other places. And that should hopefully get us back to a kind of normal. So it doesn't look great, but so in the third person, just to fix this for the time being, what we probably should have done is remove the LODs and then redone them before changing the skeleton. But if you come into the level of detail and you go force LOD model to 1, that should fix the problem. It's still going to look like this. But we need to fix this by changing over the animations. Okay. So hopefully, if everybody runs, they should get something that looks like this. Okay. Sorry for that confusion. I always find this class fiddly. Right. So is there mass confusion in the lecture notes? How it seem to be going?
Not too much. A lot of people had the issue with the LODs that kind of completely break.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. I think the way around it, and you might know better than me, James, is to remove the LODs to start with, remove the bones, then regenerate the LODs. That should.
Yeah, that's probably the way I would tackle it. Yep, I think that's probably exactly what I would do.
Okay, well, let's look at. So the reason this is not working is because we're not running on the correct animation blueprint. We don't have the correct animations playing on this character, but because we've got a lot of the similar bone names, it is attempting to recreate it. So we want to generate the correct animations. Now, we've got 2 bunches of animations in this. We've got the ones that are in Steel, and you can see these within Content Paragon Steel, Character Hero Steel animations. But don't worry about these. We're going to come back to these in a bit, and we're going to use them for the fighting. Now, what I would like to do is look at the ones we want to recreate the animation blueprint which comes with the third-person character using this mesh. So let's go to, I think it's under the character mannequin animations. And then we're looking at Manny. So if you can come to this directory, all content character mannequins, animations Manny, you can see that we have all of these green ones are the standard animations. So we've got the jump, the idle. And you should be quite accustomed to these after the that runtime animation one. But we want to retarget to this guy. So first thing I'm going to ask you to do is come to this directory, then right-hand click on, it doesn't matter which one, I'm going to use run forward. And we will find under here, like slightly further down, there is an option to retarget animations. So it's about the 6th entry down, 1, 2, 6, yeah. Retarget animations. So I'm just right-hand clicking on animation sequence. And now if I hit the button, you can see that we come up with this retarget animation setup. Now, the first one we have is the source skeletal mesh. And below this, it wants us to know where to send these to. Now, if you type in use and select steel, you'll see that it looks a little bit like this. Now, because this comes from Epic, it is set up all ready to go, really. And this is one of the simplest ways of doing it at this point. So we've got the 2 animations. And now all I need to do is find my animation sets. And so I'm going to scroll down, and it kind of starts, it's actually MM, and you can select pretty much everything that's MM. So if you go MM, you'll be looking at all of these ones here. So these are the base animations. So it's the full loop, idle, the whole shebang. You might even be able to do it with the, I'm going to try with the blend. I've never tried retargeting the blend space, but let's try that at the same time. Now, we have a couple of options at the bottom here. You have the export, the retarget assets, and export animations. The retargeting assets could be useful if there's something wrong with the retargeting, because this is your default out of the bag way of doing it. But in order to do this, what this will do is it will create an IK rig, which we'd have a look at. It will create an IK rig for both of the skeletons, and then it will create a retarget manager, which will tell the logic between the two. Oops, that's disappeared. So I will export that just so that we can have a look at it. Annoying because it doesn't stick in on top. So, okay, well, let's start off by I'm going to export the retarget assets. And for this, I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to right-hand click and I'm going to call this retarget, just so that I can find the stuff well. So I've export, it asks me which folder to do it in, and I've selected retarget. And I'm going to do export. Now we can see it's generated the two IKs. So an IK rig for the mannequin, an IK rig for the character, and the IK retargeter, which is what can do the actual managing. But we don't actually need to use that in this case. We just need to select export animations. And again, I'm going to use the same directory, but I'm also going to put a prefix, and I'm going to put steel underscore. And this is mainly again so that I can find them. So I'm going to go into the retarget and I'm going to press export. And I'm just going to select export again. And now you can see we have all of the animations. Oh, and it looks like we've even got a relatively well-functioning blend space. So we don't even need to make the blend space. So you can see all of this is now working sort of out of the can. We got a couple of little problems. The feet aren't perfect, but we could correct that with the control rig. But we have everything. So now what we need to do is we need to make an animation blueprint for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump. Right, so hopefully everyone's there. Let's see. Now seems like a good time to take a break. I think we're halfway through the lesson. So if we take a 5-minute break, we will kick off by duplicating the animation blueprint after a second. So if we start up again at about 5 past, so about 7 minutes from now, I will just pause the stuff in the meantime. Okay. Just pause the recording. Okay. Let's make a new animation blueprint. So I'm going to save all at this point. I'm going to start on my new animation. So again, I'm going to select this guy and just control B, using him as kind of a bookmark in this situation. And when I've got to the skeleton, if I right-hand click, I have the option to, where is it, the skeletal mesh? I need create, here. So under the skeleton, I've got the option to create an animation blueprint. I'm going to come down to this animation blueprint, and I'm going to, I'll name this steel I'll make it animation blueprint underscore steel. Okay. Now, I'm going to open this up so that we've got it up here. Kill this down, and I have deleted version over here, so I can grab that. Third person character. Hitro has a question, and so as Solomon, could you go over them? I'm still sharing the screen. Yeah, James is. What other questions? Okay.
They're saying they think you may be sharing the wrong screen. I think you're just sharing the animation window
Okay.
with it, so it might just be that you just need to share your whole screen.
That's weird. Okay.
Either that or it just crashed. It could have been that as well.
So this was what I was thinking I was sharing, the animation IPP steel.
Okay, now we can see. Yeah, we're good now.
Okay.
If you could start that over, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem. I haven't done much at this point. But
Okay.
what I've done is I've found the skeleton. So steel underscore use. Then I've right hand clicked, and under create, there is an object, an option to create an animation blueprint. So, and I've named that blueprint ABPs underscore steel. Okay. Now, hopefully you've got a blank animation blueprint, which is working with the preview. It's assigned to our use skeleton. But what I'm also going to ask you guys to do is, if we jump into the third person character that I'm hoping you guys have got tagged across the top here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the animation blueprint, jump to the directory, and I also want to open up APB underscore Manny. And the reason we want to do this is because we can copy across the code. There's a lot of code in here, and you've just done a 2-hour class where you put it together from scratch. I don't want to ask you guys to do that all again. So the quickest way to get this up and running is to just copy what we've already got. So if you can open up ABP Manny, you should have something that looks like this. So hopefully you have two blueprints here. So you have APB steel, APB Manny. And again, the location for that is content character mannequin animation, APB underscore Manny. Right, so let's start copying stuff across. So if we jump into APB Manny, the first thing that we want to copy is the event graph. So we come into the event graph and select everything with Control C. Copy everything. So select everything and copy it with Control C. And then if you come into ABP Steel and go to the event graph, just press Control V. And we should have all of the code copied across. Now, if you hit compile, you're going to see a whole load of compilation errors. But these are all the same error. The main problem is we have not created the variables which are required to run this. So we can fix this quite simply. If you right-hand click on each of the variables, and go create variable character. The next one, create variable movement component. Then you can hit compile again. You'll see some of them have disappeared. And then create variable velocity, create variable ground speed, create variable should move, create variable is falling. By then, all of these should be working. Delete that. I don't need that. Now, fingers crossed this next part works. If you jump to the AMI graph, then you do the same thing in the AMI graph in the APB Mani. Press Control C. So you're copying this. We then just do Control V here and plug that in. Press compile, and it should just work. I've taken the control rig out for the time being, just because it references specific bones, and if we want to set that up, we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to do that manually.
So Ed, they're asking to see if you could please go over that last bit again, where you copy and fix the variables, I guess.
Okay, so I'll start with the variables. So what I've done is it's a little bit hard to redo, but if I'll delete the variables and redo it. So I'm just going to delete what I think is all of these variables. Delete. See the event graph. Oh no, okay, that's not good. Okay, so I'll demonstrate. So what you've probably got is you've got a couple of keys. So we've got the APB steel. If we're in the event graph at the top, we've probably got a couple of nodes here. We don't need those, so you can delete them. But what we want to do is to come over to the ABB Mani, and on the event graph for Mani, you just want to copy all of this. So I've left-hand clicked, dragged up, and I've gone Control C. So that will copy all of this. So we're going to be going between these. So it's really good to have both of them on a tab. Now I'm jumping back into APB Steel. And in the event graph, I am just going to paste everything. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, when you push compile, it's going to throw up a lot of red errors. And that's going to be because you don't have these variables. Now, the quickest way to fix these is to find the red error, right-hand click, and go, and there'll be an option for create variable. And if you select that, it will create the variable automatically with all the correct settings. And you'll need to do that for all of them. But you might not want to do all of them at once, because the same variable is in multiple places. So, and you don't want to create duplicate. So by compiling, it will tell you which ones are left. Has that covered it, do you think, James?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Annan graph is basically the same thing. Just copy and paste the Annan graph graph.
The Annan graph is even a little bit simpler. So the Annan graph, I've selected all of these. We don't actually need the control rig, because unless we get to the point where we can look at fixing it, it's not going to work yet with our new character. But all I've done is I've come in here, I've dragged up on Control C, and then I've jumped into the AMI graph on this side. I've done Control V. And so if I don't have this, for example, so I've done Control V, I'm not plugging in the control rig, because the control rig is specific to the skeleton which it was created with. So it will fall apart if you try and connect it with that skeleton. If I push compile, and now at this point we should see that it's still broken, but that's because we are yet to apply the animations. We've yet to swap the animations over to the retargeted ones, but we've now got an animation graph which we can do that. So I'll double that because I've created a second locomotion that shouldn't matter. Do you think we are safe to move on?
I believe so.
Okay. Right, I'm going to jump into. So let's start off with locomotion. Locomotion is one of the simpler parts because all we're doing is we're going from idle to walk run. And we can do this and then we can test it immediately to see if it's working or if something's broken. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump into idle. And you can see that we have the mm_idle. So all I need to do now is search through the asset browser and look for idle. And you can see that I have steel mm_idle. So I can drag that in, plug that in, compile, and bang, he's idling. So we swapped over that animation. I'm going to go back to locomotion, and I'm going to jump into walk run. Now for this, we need, so I'm just typing, if I type in steel, it's, okay, it's too many. So if I type in walk run, you can see that I have the steel walk run. I can drag this in, plug that into the output pin, plug the ground speed in, and compile. And hopefully that should work. I can test it by adding in an extra value. Compile. Doesn't actually look too positive. I think that's because he's not actually going to be at this blend space at this point in time. But we'll see if it works. He's not moving at the moment, so it's not playing this animation. Okay, so to reiterate what I've done there is I have gone to the AMI graph and I'm starting with locomotion. And with locomotion, it's idle and walk run. And in idle, I've just swapped the animation over for the steel idle. And in the walk run, I've swapped it over for the blend space that we made at retargeting. And it takes some use to get into, but this is locomotion. It won't have the _1. That's just because I duplicated them by pasting them. Okay, now I can test this out. But the first thing I need to do is swap over the animation blueprint. So if I come in and I search for APB steel, we should see that it jumps over to this character. So again, I have to use the animation blueprint APB steel, and then we get the new character. So now we have a functioning character. However, he does a very strange tortoisey thing when he jumps or falls off something. It's because we have only swapped over the blend space at this point. Okay. So again, I've swapped over these two animations, and in the third person character, I've changed with the mesh selected. I've changed over the AMI class to APB_steel, so the one that we've created. So do shout if you haven't got to that point or something's broken.
I think the biggest issue so far is that people liked the turtle-like all small version of the animation.
They preferred that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know how to keep it if you want to. You can. Okay, right. I'm going to jump on. I'm going to start
Uh,
swapping over the
there's just a
other.
couple of questions that I think I might try and tackle here.
Oh,
So Brandon's asking if he remembers correctly, you can retarget a whole animation blueprint. Uh, you can do live retargeting, but I don't think that's something we could have time to cover here. But we can probably leave that on a lab.
yeah, we should. Yeah, if you want to, I'll be interested to see that as well. There
And
is, yeah. Once you've got an IK rig, you can. There's a number of things that you can do, but yeah. If James, if you could do, if you could,
yeah,
uh,
I think we'll do that in a lab.
yeah.
There's another
Okay.
question that I actually have that I want to know as well because I never really thought about it too much. But when you're doing preview instances of uh the uh animation blueprints or when you're just assigning it, it'll have like an underscore C for the animation blueprint's name.
Yeah.
Does that stand for class? Or do we do we know?
I don't know.
I don't
Sure.
know
It,
either.
that usually stands for class. I think it's used also in the full names of the blueprints as well. So that's usually underscore C something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd never actually even
Yeah.
questioned it for some reason.
I
Yeah,
thought
that there, yeah.
because if I select BP Queen,
It
yeah,
just
it
assigns it,
adds
yeah.
the C onto it, but it's not part of the username that I've made. So yeah, it must be class. It's an interesting one. Okay, well, let's fix these other parts of the blueprint while we're here. So I'm going to I'm going to close that down and his skeleton. I'm going to go back to the steel. And let's look at the other places where we need to add these in. So if I go back to the AMI graph, we've done locomotion. We want to do main states now. So if I jump into main states, we have the locomotion state that we've done. So let's do the land one. Now, we might just be able to, can I just change this over? Like, no. Okay. So I'll now drag in the land one and plug that into the base. Now, if I remember, land was additive, and it should be set to, well, we'll see if it's not set to additive. So if you ever see a character shrink down and then get big again, that's because you're playing an additive animation as a normal animation. So, and the land is an additive one. But because we've retargeted it, I'm hoping that that will still come up as additive. I'll just, otherwise we'll fix it when we go in there. Next up, we have jump. So I'm going to find jump. Plug that in. And then we have the for loop. So I'm looking for for. And I'm going to plug that in. And try compile. So again, I've just gone through the, so on the AMI graph, I've gone through the main state. And I'm going to change land. Everyone that doesn't have these crisscross, because that's a conduit. So I need to change jump, for loop, land, and we've done locomotion. And that should mean that we can now, yeah, we got a problem with the land animation. It's going in the opposite direction. Okay, so details. Okay, so yeah, so okay, to fix the land animation, the MM_land, what we need to do is we need to change the AMI type to, at the moment it says no additive. I think we need to set it to local space. Just going to test that to confirm. Yeah, there you go. So if you ever see it freaking out, usually it gets small, but in this case it's got large. I think if you just play it without adding something on, otherwise, because I'm playing it as an additive, it's made it huge. So, so again, if you want to fix the land, what we have to do is we have to, in the additive settings, we have to change the additive AMI type to local space. And that's going to mean that it's just going to add this impact to the locomotion animation, which is playing. And that should mean we now have a full setup for movement. Okay. Got half an hour left. I would like to get some punches and some functionality into this guy. So how's everybody doing?
Looking good. I'm not seeing many questions. Some people are typing. So could we do a retarget of any biped onto Manny or Quinn? That's a question that Jose Manuel has.
Yes, you can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a punch and maybe a more complicated move, and then I'm going to show retargeting some of these animations back to Manny and Quinn. However, what we'll probably do in the lab is we will look at taking animations from a non-epic skeleton and apply them back. Because what we need to do at that point is we need to create our own IK rig. So we need to, and that's a little bit of work, but it's getting more intuitive as it goes. But we can. But I'll demonstrate it to you, and you'll see why the oddities about it. But seeing as we've got like half an hour on this, what we'll do is we'll just work with what we've got in this file for the time being. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, right. In that case, let's look at creating some. I want to do some stuff on AMI notifiers because we want to look at creating some punches and kicks. So this character comes with a whole load of animations. If we go to steal animations, you can see that we've got a number of these. And I brought these in because it's quite useful, because these are the kind of stuff that you'd love to have in a lot of cases. Like we've got things like hit reacts, and we've got taunts, and we've got just a better idol, which is more. We've got victory, and we've got things like knockbacks. I think this is the one that I want to use for an attack. So I want to use the ground break in this instance. And we're going to add some notifiers in so that we can stop the movement. Because in the last session, James, did you get to the point of splitting animations through different top and bottom of the body?
Yeah, we did do lead blend per bone for the little wave. So we did do that.
Okay.
Yeah, up to you if you want to go over it again or.
Oh, no. Yeah, I just wanted to, because I'm doing it in a different way, and I want to show everybody that there are different methods. Okay, so I'm going to add this kick in. Okay, so at first, what I'm going to do is, if you guys could find this kick. So where again it is we are in, you can either search for guard break or attack in search. You should be able to find it. but it is in Character Hero Steel's animations. And I'm looking at Steel, Attack, Guard, Break, A. Okay, and what I want to do is I'm going to create a montage off of this. So I'm going to right-hand click, and I'm going to under create. I'm going to create a Annie montage. So first thing I'm doing is I'm finding guard break, right-hand clicking. I'm going to create a Annie montage. Okay, and I'm going to call this steel kick. That will do. So we should be able to find this. Now, I want to play this kick from within steel. So if I come up and I grab steel here, no, if I grab the third person character, I'm going to do an event graph, and you should do an enhanced input action for sort of attack, but I'm just going to use a key left click. Left button. Let's use a debug key left button mouse for the time being. So just for simplicity. Now, for the kick, the first thing that I want to do is I don't want to do this if I'm in the air. I don't want to use this attack. I would use a different attack if I was in the air. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the character movement in as a component, and I'm going to search for is falling. And I'm going to select a branch, and I will plug this in. So this means I can play a different animation depending on if I am in the air or not. Okay, now, so if is falling is false, I can do this animation. So the first thing I need is my mesh. I want to play the animation on the mesh. And I'm going to drag off here, and I'm going to type play montage. And what's nice about dragging off of here and selecting play montage is if you standardly type in play montage, you will get this option, play Annie montage. Here, if you get play montage, you'll see that they are different. So this has events all tagged to the state of the montage. So this is going to allow me to place an event on when it's completed, or when it's blended out or interrupted. Also, there's numerous different sort of settings that I can interact with. I'm not actually going to use that, so we could do either, but I'm going to use Annie montage, Annie notifiers in order to control this. So the montage to play is steel kick. And so just bring this down like that. So hopefully you have something that looks a little bit like this. Okay, so let's test that out. If I use left click, you can see that I now kick. And my first problem is, if I kick and I'm running, the character movement isn't applicable. It does not stay with. It doesn't stop and kick. And that's what I would like to achieve. Okay, because this is a standing still move. But when you attack, I'd like the character to stop. And what we're going to do to achieve this is we're going to use Annie notifiers. So let's set this up. Now, before we can use the Annie notifiers, we need to add in the logic for it. And it's quite simple logic. All we want to do is come over to, in the BP third person character, all I want to do is drag the move input to the left. And I am going to make a branch before the move input. And I'm going to set it to false like this. I'm going to right-hand click and promote this to a variable, which I'm going to change to block movement. So we can only walk forward at the point that block movement is false. So this just acts as a gate that stops the movement. Need to do that. Okay, so we just got a Boolean variable and we got block movement. Now, I'm going to want to do this a lot because I've got a lot of different animations and there's a lot of them that I want you to not be able to move during doing. So I'm going to use a Annie notifier so that I can control when it happens. So I'm going to come back into, I'll just do it in the main directory here. A right-hand click, and I'm going to go under Blueprint class, and I'm going to search for notify. And you'll see at the top, we have something that's called an Annie notify. Now, when we do behavior trees and state machines tomorrow, this kind of thing we're going to do a lot. We're going to be creating classes for a specific action, and it gets very, very modular, so that we're sort of bolting things together a lot. But by creating Annie notifier, select, and I'm going to call this. I'm going to call it block movement. Rename Annie notifier underscore block movement. Okay, now if I double click and open this up, you're going to get something that looks like this. Now, it's a bit weird because we don't have any settings at all. We don't have any event graph or anything like that, but we do have functions here. So on the functions, we have a drop down for override. And for this, I'm just going to use receive notify. Now we have a function. Now for this, all I want to do is change that variable that we've added on the blueprint. So in order to do this, I need access to the pawn. Now I could do get player pawn, but it's a bit dangerous because the chances are you'll want to use this notifier on numerous different characters. They might be AI, they might be anything like that. So we can't just get the character pawn, but we have the mesh component. So if I drag out and I go get owner, that is going to return the actor. So we can see under here, it gives you an actor reference, and that should be the pawn because, whatever pawn is connected to. Now I'm still going to need to cast because, like per usual, we need to access the class. So I'm going to go cast to third person character and plug that in. And now I can just set block movement. Now, I'm going to right-hand click on the block movement and promote it to a variable. That way, I can make that instance editable. And that will allow us to use the same node to allow movement as to block movement. So I'd like you to create something that looks like that. I'm going to compile and save. And now I'm going to go find the montage we created. So that's not the montage. So the montage we called kick, didn't we? So I'll just search for kick and open up this montage. Now, AMI notifiers are used for a lot of things, but their primary function is to connect anything to an animation. Now, if I was to right-hand click on the animation on one, because this is the notification track, you'll be able to see that I've got a choice to add a notifier. And there are a number of pre-written codes that are stuff like play sounds, which is really useful if you want to like play footprints, or you could play a Niagara effect, or a number of things. But the one we care about is AM block movement. So I'm going to create that. I'm going to delete that because I want to move it actually here. Yeah. So I'm going to move it so that it's quite early on. And under the block movement, you can see, because I have exposed a variable, I can now select that on as block movement. And now I know that's how long I want to do the kick. Now we get back to about here, and I'm going to allow movement again. So it just by default allows the movement. And I don't want to do it too far to the end, just in case we have a fade out. If something's fading into, blending into another animation, sometimes the animation notifiers don't play. So yeah. So again, what I've done is I've come down to the notify track, right-hand clicked, and I've added in that block movement notifier that we put together.
So, Ed, just to recap a few steps now that you've kind of reached a natural point, are you able to, one, go over the way in which you created the animation montage? Because I think a few people have a lot of skeletons and they just want to make sure that they're selecting the right one.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
And then, yeah, I guess a quick overview of what you've done with the anim notify blockers and all that stuff.
Yep, no problem. So if I come in and I type, I'm just gonna come to the top directory and I'm going to type break, because I know that this is the animation that I want to use for the montage. And you can create a montage and then add animations to it, but I'm going to create the montage from the animation. So when I right-hand click on it, on create, you can see that there is an option for create AMI montage. And when I select that, I'm going to call this kick 2 just because I'm duplicating it up. Now, if I go kick 2, so I've got this animation again. So you should have something that looks like this. You theoretically could just create an animation and just drag animations in here, because there's fun stuff that you can do. It goes into one animation or from the other into another one. So you can create sort of convoluted setups and sort of group animations together and do other things. But I wonder if I can make these blendable. But yeah, this is how we create a montage, and it's just a sort of enveloping actor that allows us to play an animation. Okay, now if I was to go, how I played the montage was I used this piece of code here, where I just did a debug left key mouse button. And when pressed, I played a montage in the just played the montage here. So I selected the montage, and you just need a reference to the mesh. But I wanted to make sure it wasn't falling. Now, if we had more time, there's an example of doing an equivalent effect, but doing an option for an attack if you are jumping. I will show that, but I won't have time to go over it in this class. Now, the next thing that I did was I created an animation. I created an animation notifier. So you can see it, we have it here, animation notifier block movement. But how I did that was I grabbed the blueprint class and I searched for notify. And you can see at the top here, we have Ami notify. I selected that and block 2. And in order to make the function here, I'll just show it here. But the first thing that I did was you have to override. So there are a number of points that you can override. So you can either have default trigger weight threshold or notify name, but just receive notify. So once I did that, I could then add in the code. And the way I did the code was like this. I had to get the owner of the mesh component. And then I had to cast to the third person character. And I created a variable which was instance editable so that I could edit if the movement is blocked or not. And again, how the blocking of the movement worked was on the move input, I've just placed a branch that allowed us to block the movement here.
Can you then go also how you use the anim notifier inside of the anim montage, please?
Certainly. Okay, so once I've created the montage, so I've got the montage, so in here I've got kick 2. You have a notifier track at the bottom here. And if I right-hand click on the notifier track, I've got an option to add a notifier. And the first one I called Ani block movement. When I select that, it adds in the notifier. And with it selected, I've then access to the exposed variables. So I can tick block movement on here so that we know that the block movement happens at the beginning. And whenever I tick block movement, I need to untick it. So I created another Ani notifier further on, and I left that unticked. So what this means is when the animation starts, it blocks you from moving forward. And when it stops, it allows you to move forward again.
And just because a few people are saying that they don't have the tick box to do block movement, can you go over making it instance editable again, just so they can see?
Certainly. So I have this variable for block movement, and there is a button here that says instance editable. And it's got a little, you can also turn it on. You can see what's instance editable from this eye here. It's just like when we were working with the other ones, you could expose it so that it was available within the details panel. That will allow you to make it visible in the Ani notifier. So that is and this is great whenever you want to connect up functionality to an animation. it keeps it modular so that you could play different animations and you always know those that are connected to the animation. Okay. Do you think I'm good to move on? We're going to finish in a minute anyway.
I think you are, yes. Just trying to see if there's any other questions but I think you've covered pretty much all of it.
We will jump into the
I think we're
lab
good.
so that we can look at it, but let's just
We've
test.
got a lab in a second as well, so
Yeah, so you know what? He's not moving because I have defaulted the block movement on. So now this is a lot more realistic. As he runs, he stops and he kicks. So you can see how that generates it sort of locks the functionality. It only works when he's on the ground and he takes that kick. Okay, now what I will touch on now, just for a couple of minutes, is going the opposite way. Let's see if we can do that. Now, I won't expect you to follow along because we just got a couple of minutes, and I want to make sure I get this on the video. I'm now going to jump into the third person character, and I'm going to set myself back to the I'm going to set myself back to Manny. So I'm going to go SKM Manny, and I'm going to search for Manny here. I'm going to do a compile. And yeah, so Manny works. Okay, so we jump back in just by changing over the animation blueprint and the skeleton. It works. But let's see if we can retarget that kick to Manny. So I am going to type in break. I'm going to right hand click, and this time I'm going to do a retarget animation, and I'm going from steel to SK Manny. Okay, and I'm going to find break. So guard break. I'm going to export the animation, and I'm going to call this man just at the beginning, just so I can find it quickly. And I go export. And so here we go. We have that animation. It's looking pretty good. So if I take that animation and I now create I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a honey montage, and I'm going to call this montage man kick. Now I can jump into this montage and I can do the same thing that I did last time. Under the notify track, I can stop him moving, block movement at the beginning. I'm going to block the movement, and towards the end, I am going to release the movement. I'm going to bring it back in a bit further. So if I jump back into the third person character and swap this over to man kick, and we'll find that this is all working. You can see that I can get a kick straight out, and it looks like it's pretty good. Sometimes you get some sort of odd sort of scaling issues, but from this, you should be able to get any of the animations from any of the Paragon assets and just map them sort of that straightforwardly across to Manny. Right. Do we have, I mean, I don't expect you to follow along with that just because it was just like the last few minutes that we were kicking off there. But does that make any sense? Any questions before we kick off and go to the lab?
I think there might be a question or two coming through. So I'll just keep you on hold here for a sec.
Yeah, no problem.
And just a heads up, because there's some people just did retarget the montage directly. Apparently that works.
Does it? It's getting good.
So someone's struggling with adding the second notifier inside of the anim montage.
Okay.
It should be the same.
Should be the same. That might be something if when we can share screen, we can look at that in the
Yeah, I think we could take a look at that in the lab.
so there is so much more stuff that we can go over, but my hope is that you've done sort of that you feel confident at this point that you can go and buy animations that are on the Epic skin and move them across, or you can go away and use any of the meshes that are part of the Epic rigged to the Epic skeleton and set them up as an animation blueprint. Those are like the fundamentals that I would like you to get out of this course, that you feel like you can change your mesh and we can go over if you're not using this afterwards. But the nice thing, yeah, that's all good. Right, okay, in that case, what I'm
Seems
going
like
to
that issue just got solved as well. So
pardon? The
it
issues.
seems like that issue, he was left clicking instead of right clicking. That's all.
Right, yeah, no problem.
All
Okay,
good.
in that case, what I'll do is I'll fire up the lab. Okay, thanks everybody. I hope that worked okay. I'll catch you in the lab.